Imagine a world where everything you thought was real wasn't. Not just for you, but for entire groups of people. A shared hallucination, a collective delusion, so powerful it rewrites history, alters memories, and shapes the very fabric of existence. What if these shared realities aren't just fantasy, but an unacknowledged truth, a phenomenon so profound and unsettling that society has collectively agreed to forget it ever happened? Tonight, we're going to pull back the curtain on something deeply unnerving, a concept so close to the fabric of our everyday lives that once you see it, you might never unsee it. Get ready because the reality you inhabit might be far more fragile than you could ever conceive. To understand this chilling concept, we need to first grasp the power of collective belief. For centuries, humans have sought patterns, explanations, and shared narratives to make sense of a chaotic world. From ancient mythologies explaining the cosmos to modern political ideologies shaping nations, our consensus on what is real isn't always based on objective fact. Sometimes it's built on stories, on interpretations, on a collective agreement to simply believe. Think about how folklore evolves, how urban legends spread, or how even historical accounts can be subtly reshaped over generations, not by malicious intent, but by the sheer weight of shared recollection and cultural reinforcement. We're not talking about simple misremembering here. We're moving into territory where entire groups experience phenomena that seem to contradict verifiable reality. Yet for them, it is undeniably true. These aren't isolated cases of individuals succumbing to delusion. These are instances where a significant portion of a population, sometimes geographically isolated, sometimes subtly interwoven into the larger fabric of society, experiences a different version of reality. It's a phenomenon so profound, so challenging to our understanding of the universe, that mainstream science largely shies away from it, dismissing it as mass hysteria, collective memory distortion, or simply error. But what if it's something more, something deeper, an echo of a truth that our minds grapple to comprehend? This leads us to the psychological bedrock of shared realities. The human brain is a master of pattern recognition, but it's also incredibly susceptible to suggestion and social proof. If enough people believe something is true, our own minds often unconsciously adjust to fit that consensus. This isn't just about peer pressure. It's about a fundamental drive to belong and to maintain a coherent worldview. Think of how the Mandela effect captured global attention. Seemingly millions of people vividly remember Nelson Mandela dying in prison in the 1980s, despite historical records confirming his release and subsequent presidency before his passing in 2013. Or the Berenstain Bears, for many, Berenstein. These aren't just mistakes. They're inconsistencies in a shared memory, a collective glitch in the matrix. While often dismissed as simple confabulation or the fallibility of memory, for those who experience it, the conviction is absolute, deeply unsettling. But what if the Mandela effect is just a tiny, harmless ripple of a much larger, darker current? What if entire towns have existed in a shared reality where their history, their geography, even the people around them were slightly or even drastically different from the objective truth? Social psychology provides some clues with concepts like groupthink and conformity experiments, showing how easily individuals can be swayed. But these experiments often pale in comparison to the sheer scale and profound nature of what some shared realities suggest. The very idea that our perception of reality can be collectively swayed, potentially to the point of creating entirely new localized truths, is a terrifying thought. It implies that the objective world outside our heads might not be as solid as we believe, that our shared understanding is, in fact, incredibly malleable and susceptible to forces we barely comprehend. And perhaps that is precisely why nobody talks about it, because acknowledging it means questioning the very foundations of existence. But things took a far darker turn when reports began to surface, not of altered memories, but of entire villages experiencing shifts in their physical surroundings, or even their very populace. Consider the chilling yet unverified stories from isolated communities in parts of South America and Eastern Europe, accounts passed down through generations, often hushed whispers shared only among the eldest, stories of invisible villages or shifted lands. One particularly harrowing, though entirely anecdotal, account from the 1930s speaks of a small agricultural community deep in an unnamed valley, where the harvest failed catastrophically for 3 consecutive years. Desperate, the villagers, led by their elders, engaged in what they believed were ancient rituals, hoping to appease the land. Records, if you can call them that, are scarce and contradictory, often found in fragmented journals or local church ledgers. The official story is that the village was simply abandoned due to famine, but the local folklore, preserved in scattered verbal traditions, paints a far more disturbing picture. They say that after the third ritual, on a cold, moonless night, the entire village, all 47 inhabitants, their homes, their fields, even the small winding road leading to it, simply vibrated, not just in the earth, but in their very minds. The landscape around them changed, the mountains shifted, the river rerouted itself. When the villagers awoke the next morning, their world was utterly transformed. For them, this new landscape was always what had been. Their memories of the old valley, the old mountains, were overwritten, replaced by a new coherent reality. Yet if outsiders ventured too close, they would find only untouched wilderness where the village should have been. No ruins, no signs of habitation, just dense forest. The villagers, meanwhile, lived out their lives in a new valley, convinced it had always been this way. What happened to them? Did they collectively displace themselves into an alternate dimension? Or did their shared mental state literally reshape their perceived environment, making it utterly invisible and inaccessible to anyone not part of their collective shared reality? The implications are staggering. If a collective human consciousness can indeed bend reality, even just perceptually, on such a grand scale, what else are we capable of altering without realizing it? And why do these stories, so profound in what they suggest, remain on the fringes, relegated to superstition and myth, never properly investigated or acknowledged by the broader world? Perhaps it's because the truth is too much to bear. Perhaps the thought that our shared reality is not objective, but a consensus, is simply too terrifying to confront. And so we collectively agree, just like that village, to forget such things are even possible, pushing them into the dark corners of the unthinkable. What they discovered next, or rather, what they consistently failed to discover, changed everything about how the outside world perceived these anomalies. By refusing to perceive them at all, any investigations into these vanishing villages or historical discrepancies were always met with baffling dead ends. Maps would prove inaccurate, geological surveys would contradict local accounts, and witnesses from nearby towns would offer conflicting, often bewildered, testimonies. It was as if a powerful, invisible hand was scrubbing these instances from the public record, maintaining a carefully curated, singular version of truth. The most unsettling aspect is the consensus among those who experience these shared realities. For them, there is no anomaly. The river always flowed this way, the mountain always stood there, and their memories are entirely congruent with their current, unique, shared reality. The dissonance occurs only when an outsider attempts to cross this invisible boundary, encountering a world that simply doesn't align. This isn't a delusion for one person, it's a co-created reality for many, and that is what makes it so profoundly disturbing. It forces us to ask, how many realities are coexisting, subtly overlapping, or completely separated by thin veils of collective perception? And how much of what we accept as universal truth is merely the dominant shared reality, reinforced by billions, effectively erasing minority realities from existence? To this day, we may never truly know the full extent or mechanisms behind these shared realities. The implications are too vast, too destabilizing to our fundamental understanding of existence. If our perception of the world can be collectively manipulated or created, then the very cornerstone of objective truth crumbles. It suggests that the line between sanity and shared delusion is far thinner than we ever dared to imagine. It challenges the very notion of a single, verifiable universe, opening the door to countless possible realities, each maintained by the collective consciousness of its inhabitants. And perhaps the reason why nobody talks about shared realities isn't because they don't exist, but because acknowledging them would unravel everything. It would force us to confront the terrifying possibility that our world, our memories, our very selves, are not as solid or as immutable as we believe, leaving us to wonder, what shared realities are we currently inhabiting, unknowingly agreeing upon, and what truths have we collectively agreed to forget? The next video explores the secret history of cities that vanished overnight, leaving behind no trace but echoes and forgotten documents.